Hello everyone. This week we're going to talk about Chapter 4, which is footprinting and social engineering. Now, in my opinion, this is the absolute most important concept that you're going to learn, is the ability to find information out about individuals and companies and manipulate human beings. You can learn all the technical tricks in the book, but as long as you still have people involved, why bother going after the hard technical stuff? So in this chapter, the book talks about web tools for footprinting, competitive intelligence around the industry. You hear the term OSINT, or open source intelligence gathering. That's the term everybody uses. We talk about DNS zone transfers and various types of social engineering. I'm sure I'm going to have some great comments on what the book has to say here. So, many attackers case the joint. Yes. The whole point of footprinting is to gather as much information about the details of an individual or a company. And individuals and companies, surprisingly, love to talk about themselves. So footprinting, also called reconnaissance, I use the term OSINT, is about finding information on a company's network. I think more importantly, finding information on a company's people. It's passive and non-intrusive, and several available web tools. This is going to be fun. Let's see what web tools they want to talk about. So, yes, so there is a difference, and important to realize. There's active footprinting and passive footprinting. You should get approval to do active footprinting. You should get someone to sign off on a contract before you actively footprint. The activities may or may not be legal unless you get approval from a company or an individual to actively footprint them. This is, and when we talk about active, we're talking about actually interacting and interfacing with their servers. So port scanning, zone transfers, things like that. When you're doing a project, you want to do passive, so find out as much information as you can that's put out there. LinkedIn accounts, the county diagrams of the facilities, obituaries, anything you can find, as well as active techniques as well. So here are some web tools you can use for footprinting. Look, it's Google. And actually, your number one thing is going to be Google. Google is amazing. Maltego, yes. These are really good. I will say another very important one, let me flip to this next one, is LinkedIn. You have greyhatwarfare.com, which is scanned S3 buckets. Why Shodan isn't on here. Shodan, SHODAN.io, is amazing. Census. Netcraft is a good one. Netcraft has always been reliable. Things I use as well. DNSdumpster.com. If you don't want to actively go after someone's DNS zone file, DNS Dumpster does it. So I find that useful as well. So take a look at these web tools. We use these, some of these, others as well, as I mentioned in some of our projects that I do for work. But there's tons of sites out there that you can use to scrape passive information off of companies. Competitive intelligence. This is all legal. Welcome to America. There's information on everyone. You can buy it, you can find it, and sometimes the most powerful things you can get are the free pieces of information on a company. Now, when you're reporting to a company, you have to explain how you gathered it, have a good methodology. But let me say this. Don't, when you're writing a report for a company, spoil all your secrets. Don't tell them everything you do. You need to come up with your secret sauce that you use, your scripts, your websites, your process. Do not give that up. Analyzing a company website. You can use Zap. Gather information. Here's an example of the main Zap window. And play around with Zap. You can manipulate traffic between your browser and the website. So man in the middle, essentially, is the attack type. You can add the configuration of a web browser to direct traffic through Zap. But again, unless you're doing this as part of a bug bounty or you have approval to do so, don't necessarily just go and do it. So make sure you're testing on sites and systems that you're permitted to do so. Once you've configured your browser and you want to use Zap, you can browse the target site. Target site will appear in Zap Tools, and then you can spider or crawl the site, and you'll be able to see in your spidered tab essentially everything that was gathered from a website. Now, spidering is fine. You can spider a site all you want. When you are trying to find and exploit vulnerabilities, that is, again, the approval line. So, again, just be super careful about what you're doing. And here is a screenshot of a scanning report from Zap. So, who is obviously super important if you want to find out who purchased a website, who controls a website, but nowadays it really is a bit meaningless, considering that you can hire a domain broker to sit between you and ICANN. So, sometimes you won't even find any information on who is regarding the real owner of a website. Email addresses are great. Again, you can use no one uses Google Groups for this, so don't even bother. Try writing a script to scrape Google for Google proper for corporate email addresses. Not that you should be going on S3 buckets, but S3 buckets are a rich source of information. Essentially when you're looking at corporate data, S3 buckets have been left open, oftentimes with corporate information. Google Groups is not really the way to go here. But, yes, people's email addresses are all over the place. The basics of HTTP. HTTP operates on port 80, yes. You can pull information off of a web server using basic HTTP commands, yes. What's more useful oftentimes is the banners that the servers serve up. Be careful. It's telling you on HTTP right here, but most servers nowadays in the last couple of years have moved over to HTTPS. So when it says this operates on port 80, okay, yes, but secure connections on port 443. The GET request is the most basic HTTP request, so yes. Understanding HTTP client request or responses. Here's a table of various responses for the 400 series and the 500 series. And here are get, head, options, trace, connect, delete, put, post. These are your basic HTTP methods. It's good to know what the methods are, and when you're listening for web traffic, what the various connections do as they're going across the wire. Here's an example of connecting to a server. pitt.edu on port 80 and what the request and response looks like. Here's the response. Returns 200, which is okay. It allows you the various HTTP methods and what the server is. Here it's Microsoft IIS 7.5. It's including the ASP.NET interpreter. Yes, if you can send requests to a web server, you can send requests to all kinds of servers. Be careful when doing that. And yes, you can gather based on, so I had just mentioned that in the example slide, they're showing ASP.NET being run, Microsoft IIS 7.5. You can use the server responses to determine the various patch levels and thus how that server might be vulnerable in terms of exploitation. So, whoa, we jumped from a URL to gathering names of IT personnel? Okay. Sure. You can gather some useful information from a URL. But I don't think it goes as so far as IT personnel. So you're going to have to do a bit more digging. LinkedIn is a great place to get some information on that. Cookies, I don't know what they mean by web bugs. Apparently I must not be in the industry for long enough if I don't know what web bugs are. So I assume they mean vulnerabilities. But maybe I'm wrong. So we will continue. What is a cookie? A cookie is basically a set of information that can persist. Sits on your system. A website gets and sets information to the cookie and can last through multiple HTTP transactions. A web bug. Okay. So I call these things pixel trackers. I guess I learned something new. I didn't know it was called a web bug. But anyways, it's a 1x1 pixel image. Oftentimes, since I'll say pixel trackers are used to determine did a person open an email? Who opened an email? What's the IP address of the person that requested and opened the email? How do they do it? Well, in HTML email or even a web page, you have to request the image from a server. So your computer is going to make the request and post all of your client details, and thus it's used for that purpose. So what's really interesting is the DNS. And why is DNS interesting? Because if I want to know more about your network, oftentimes people will create subdomains, which are DNS entries that point to various servers used on, inside, or outside of your network. So for instance, you might have a web page, www.mycompany.com, and maybe your Exchange mail server is hosted at mail.mycompany.com. And maybe it's hosted internally. So I can use that DNS entry to determine the IP address range of servers that I want to target. DNS is super important information that I always use when I am footprinting a company. So it's good that they talk about this here. You can use the process of a DNS zone transfer to basically gather all those DNS entries. So remember, when you put a DNS entry up, it's not private. And if you're trying to do a little security through obscurity, don't put anything up through DNS as a subdomain. You use the dig command to do it. Your primary record, your SOA or Start of Authority record, shows the various zones and IP addresses, and it essentially gives me a basic network diagram of your organization. Here's an example of the results of using dig. Again, if you're worried, there's a lot of third-party services that have already essentially scanned the web and run dig on every server they can. So if you want to gather some DNS information, but you don't want to gather it, DNS Dumpster does it. A bunch of other sites do it. If we go back to the list here, Netcraft does it as well. So just be aware DNS is super powerful and super useful. All right, social engineering. It is the art of tricking human beings. So it says tactics here: persuasion, intimidation, coercion. Okay, these are great. You're not going to use these in an attack. All you need is the power of persuasion. If you are a bad guy, bad person, this is what you do. But if you want to leave no trace, you do this first one. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to underline that. Let me give you an example. I had a client, and we don't want to cause any problems for them, but I want to see, can I get into their bank? So I call up, and I call up one employee. I get information on one of their customers, their biggest customer. Then I do a little digging and footprinting about that customer, see who their engineers are that are most likely working with this company. And then I call up one of the administrative assistants, and I say, hey, I got to fill out my W-4s for this year. Oh, hey, I'll just do a little chit-chat, find out some information on the administrative assistant. How's your dog doing? Oh, you had a newborn baby. How's the baby? By the way, I need an account number. I need your routing number and account number and your EIN for this form. And after building up a little trust and rapport and spoofing a phone number so they think that I'm in that area code of the client, of the customer, there's no problem. Oh, let me get that for you. Not an issue. Persuasion is your best tool, your best tactic. You're going to get the most use out of it. And I hate to say it, people are pretty darn gullible. And it's not that people are stupid. It's the fact that all of us, you and me, have a tendency to try and trust people instead of trying to not trust people actively. We want to find a reason to trust each other, to build relationships. Part of your job is to exploit relationships for information. And, that's kind of the part of the job that makes it not so fruitful. Then you walk into situations in your real life and you start overthinking situations and finding vulnerabilities and thinking about the worst in people, and you just have to be careful. But this is part of your job. You want to gain what it says here: personal information, confidential information. What information would take a company down? And that's what you're trying to do. And you're trying to get that information by tricking people through the power of persuasion, convincing, gaining people's trust. And if you're really good at it, you walk away with them never knowing anything happened. None the wiser. Most difficult. The book has it right here. It is the most difficult to protect against. How do you change human nature? It's hard. Why crack a password? You can ask for it. Absolutely. Read Art of Deception by Kevin Mitnick. Good book. If you want to learn how to manipulate people, learn about magic tricks. A lot of people in the cybersecurity industry are super interested in magic tricks and board games. Why? Because it's all about strategy. It's all about manipulation. It's all about bluffing. That's what you want to do. Quid pro quo. There was no quid pro quo. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, so these are some techniques you could use. Urgency is definitely one of them. exploits the fact that people want to help each other out in a pinch. Quid pro quo. Hey, you investigate the Bidens. We'll give you some money. Everybody wants to do kind of payback for good measure. Status quo. Hey, you don't want an emergency on your hands. So hey, let me make your life a little easier. I'll take care of it for you. Don't worry. Go about your day. Kindness. Again, this is all about trust. And one of the more interesting ones is position. Now, when you think position, you're probably thinking, oh, do this because I'm the CEO. But ask yourself this. When's the last time you questioned someone with a clipboard? Or someone with a t-shirt with a logo on it? Or someone with a badge? If you look like you're supposed to be there, typically we don't want to rock the boat as human beings. The social protocol dictates we just let that stuff right up. They clearly know what they're doing. They are wearing a uniform. They are in a position of power. They have a clipboard. They are there to make decisions. No, but use that to your advantage. Obviously you want to train your users not to do this kind of stuff, but it's hard. Training users is hard. You have to ask the question, do you fire someone? I might have mentioned this in another video, but when you're setting policies, do you fire someone the first time they reveal too much information, the first time they click on a phishing link, or the fifth time? Do you never do it? Do your policies have teeth? These are things to consider. The OSSTMM has a social engineering telephone attack template. Man, you start doing this, you don't need this. You get good at it, right? And it kind of sucks because you don't want to let this bleed into your real life. But once you start figuring out what makes people tick, it becomes second nature. And you have to do this, right? You have to have people, the good guys, do it. Because you can't just leave it to the people who are trying to steal money and manipulate others for their own personal, political, and financial gain. You have to have people protect against it. It's your job. You gotta learn how to do it. Same reason why you have cops investigating homicides, right? Yeah, over time they get the mindset of the people they investigate. But you have to have some folks do that. Shoulder surfing. Yes, I love the fact that they have high-powered telescopes on here. You know what else is interesting? I fly a lot, and people will type their PIN codes and passwords on their phone and mobile devices. And what's interesting is, for ease of use, both Android and Apple will show the last character of a masked password for about half a second. Okay, I just record video of that if I have to. It's shoulder surfing is super easy to do. Don't get caught doing it. But if you want to gather information, want to gather passwords, it's a good technique. Yeah, hide your computer, get a privacy screen. Look at who's around you. Are the feds chasing me? And yeah, immediately change your password if you suspect the feds are chasing you or someone. Dumpster diving is a fun part of the job, a dirty part of the job, and have an extra change of clothes. But people throw away this junk all the time. Stuff with passwords, personally identifiable information, socials. People don't shred it. I mean, unless you're Enron, people just tend to throw it away. You have to ask yourself, what's your corporate policy on throwing things away versus shredding things, destroying information, especially when you're under regulation. FERPA, HIPAA, high-tech, SOX, GLBA. You do have an obligation sometimes to destroy it, but companies don't always follow it. Again, educating users. Your end users aren't going to write DoD7 to your drives, but make sure IT is doing it. So you got to be super careful with piggybacking, but it is effective because it plays on, again, people's need to help. Oh, I forgot my badge. Will you let me in? Or, bring in a bunch of stuff to a door and see how many people with an ID card will just swipe you in. Let's say you're carrying like 10 boxes. Well, they don't want you to have to swipe in. They'll just swipe in for you. Piggybacking is a good technique. Do not do it unless you have approval to enter that facility. Same thing with dumpster diving and anything else. Anything we're saying here, unless the company is allowing you to do this, you have it in writing, in a contract, in a statement of work, don't do it because it's trespassing. It's breaking and entering. Yes, prevention, train personnel, turnstiles, man traps are good ways as well. I think we talked about phishing last week. Phishing is bad. I mean, one of the ways that we trick people the most, we make great phishing emails at my company. We are extremely successful at using information about individuals and manipulating them, and that's a technique you should learn. So, for example, one of our projects, we had this guy, and he was super interested. He was CEO of a company, super interested in public speaking. So we phished him, inviting him to one of the biggest conferences of the year to speak, in order to get him to log in to a website related to the conference. And he logged in, but the worst part about it was, and this is where it comes in and hurts a little bit, he tells his wife, he tells his kids, he tells his coworkers, hey, I'm speaking at this conference. And it was hard at the end of the project to break it to him. This is an example of a really junky phishing email. Like, what is it? ihug.com. People look at the email addresses, right? If you're working with a company and their name is mylemonadestand.com. Well, what's one of the things you should consider is buymyemonadestand.com, because all the browsers, for instance, use sans serif fonts. So lowercase l and capital I are so similar that you could use capital I in your emails and no one's going to be able to tell the difference because people don't look at it that well. Or use .co instead of .com, but use the same company name. These phishing emails with this junk, fake domain names, people look at this stuff and are aware already when we talk about user training. So if you're going to phish, do it in a smart way. Go ask yourself, okay, if I'm going to email as a CEO, go gather that CEO's email signature. Email that CEO, see if they respond, harvest the email signature out of it. Phishing is a great tool for your work, but you have to do it in a very smart way. Users are not dumb. Okay, we talked about footprinting. I'm going to mention again, LinkedIn is a great footprinting tool because all of us want to talk about, hey, I did this for my work. I used this piece of software. I used this tool, this programming language. Well, I want to know you use Siebel CRM 6.5 because I know there's a vulnerability in it. And I know Joe is the IT manager who worked for X company, and I know you're running Siebel 6.5. So it's great for footprinting for OSINT. Competitive intelligence is great. Be careful. Domain names, DNS, IP, be careful. Cookies, and now since we're all learning something, web bugs. Pixel trackers is, I think, the better term for it. Retrieving user information. Zone transfers. Again, get approval before you do that or use a third-party site. Social engineering. Again, it's taking advantage of the human want and need to trust by default. And we talked about various attacker techniques. So, yeah, I hope, I really like the social engineering topics. Like I said, I think it's, out of everything you're learning, the most important thing you're going to learn. So, focus on social engineering, I think, for your career, in terms of, hey, know the technical stuff, but know the people side, too. And again, always get approval before you do this stuff against individuals.